Hello there! My childhood was strategy themed, I guess. From being a little kid watching my father rip through horde armies in Warcraft 2 to playing Doom 2000 and Red Alert and Warcraft 3 and many more, I took a liberty to select my personal top picks strategy games from GOG, and here we go! First one would be Worms Armageddon or Worms WMD. Well, if someone would tell me that Worms doesn't require tactical approach, I would say play with my friends. This is the game that I remember is with me from primary school till like today, and I always played it with friends, no matter if hot-seated or nowadays through WarmNet. And I love everything about it, like the goofy vibe, the possibilities of making my Worm teams as stupid name as possible, and the variety of weapons and how they affect the arenas. This game has insane replayability and super cool vibes. Second one, Star Wars Empire at War. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I'm not easily pleased with Star Wars related games. But this does put a smile on my face. Solid RTS experience made by some veterans from the former Westwood, which is the OG studio of the whole genre, with really cool mechanics. The conquest really felt like conquering the galaxy far, far away. The more you expanded, the better you had to be with managing resources and setting your defenses, because you had more potential targets on the map. And my favorite unit was Ewok Suicide Bomber. Don't ask why. Haegemonia. I have a soft spot for space operas and sci-fi in general, as you can probably tell. It's been years since I played Haegemonia, but it still hits me with the vibe. I remember that I was playing it while being on vacation with my grandparents on a huge old laptop that was barely able to run this game. And it tended to overheat and crash while in game, so it was quite frustrating to play, and I remember shit ton of quick saving. But apart from that, the explosions and visuals were top-notch back in the day, and I remember that researching the technology was a bit underwhelming, as it just happened in the UI, but managing your units through the systems, sending corvettes through wormholes, and big fights with other factions really scratched the itch. Maybe it was just a phase, but I remember reading the Lost Fleet series when I was on the same vacation, so definitely a core memory from childhood. And Warhammer 40k Dawn of War. Staying in conquering space war themed strategy games, I cannot deny that Dawn of War was my first experience with 40k world, and boy, it was something. I knew Warhammer from the fantasy paper RPG and figurines, but in Poland 40k was never as popular as a fantasy one. And one day I did went to my friend's home and he showed me the Dawn of War, and my mind exploded. Orcs in space? Was that orc just got mowed by a Gatling gun? Is that a fucking chainsaw sword? My brain melted, and of course I did got my own copy. My computer barely could run it. I remember the graphics were quite high-end for the 2004, but the vibes were there. Regarding the gameplay, coming from Warcraft, Starcraft, Command & Conquer vibes, I felt right at home. Base management, building army, flooding your enemy with units. But one thing I remember very fondly, the army painter. You couldn't paint your army in campaign, but you could for online play, and oh boy, I did some painting to show off my army to my friends and kick the orc playing asses for the Emperor.
No prisoners for the Emperor!
Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I have a confession to make. When I was a kid, I didn't play it. I never had it on my family computer. Actually, my adventure with Heroes began because of my wife. She introduced me to the series. Like, I was aware it exists. Some of my colleagues played it, I watched them play, but I never got into it fully. A lot has changed since we started dating, because Asha played Heroes with her parents since being a little baby, so naturally I have to catch up. And a few years later, I have to say I'm a huge fan. This game is an absolute masterpiece. The music by Maestro Romero, the graphics that never grow old, still fresh mechanics, the beautiful art style and the sounds. If you haven't seen, I really encourage you to check the interview we did with Maestro Romero on GOG Classics Vault. It's awesome. And apart from that, I really admire the community that this game has. And I think 80% of games that I played in Heroes was actually in the Horn of the Abyss and multiplayer with my friends and Asha and her parents. And as for favorite towns, I might say Necropolis, Rampart, and the new one from Hota, Factory. Earth 2050, the Moon Project. This is the game that I forgot I played, but during my search for strategy titles in GOG library, this took me by surprise and hit me right into the feels. As you can probably see the pattern here, it's a sci-fi RTS. I only played the Moon Project part, I believe it was a sequel to 2050. And I'm aware that there are many other parts of this series, but this one I remember very well and fondly. In comparison to other sci-fi RTSs on the market in that time, it felt a bit clunky, but it had a really great atmosphere. There was a quite cool mechanic that you could actually turn off the lights of your units to perform a stealthy approach. I don't recall this idea in any other RTS, but I might be wrong. I remember the maps being quite repetitive. Well, duh, it was on the moon, but I did spend many hours in the map editor and making my own scenarios. And fun fact, it's a Polish game. SpellForce. This game was just in time for me as I finished Warcraft 3 and I craved more fantasy worlds. It had this very cool and fresh back then mechanic that tried to merge RTS with RPG, and if I remember correctly, you could switch to third-person view of your hero and control him or her with arrows instead of conventional RTS mouse. It was really cool, but one thing that I remember not so fondly was terrible voice acting. Especially when I came directly from Warcraft 3, which was really well made in terms of story and acting. Yeah, but overall, cool game, a bit generic, but switching between isometric and third-person view in 2003 blew my mind enough not to care about poor story and mech acting. So that would be it from my picks that I played and I remember and I can say anything about, but if I had to sort them somehow, it would go like this. The first one, obviously Heroes of Might and Magic 3. The second one, Dawn of War. The third one, Worms. This is a tight one, because I don't know if it should be Worms or Star Wars, but I still play Worms and I didn't play Star Wars Empire at War for many years, so yeah, let's go. Worms, Star Wars Empire at War. 5th place, Haegemonia. 6th, SpellForce, and 7th, Earth 2150, the Moon Project. And these are my top picks from GOG. Hope you like them, and if you didn't know some of these titles, I really encourage you to give them a try. See you later.